Good morning, everybody. I hope it's a lovely October morning wherever you are. I have taken the Center for Food Integrity on the road and am now coming to you from David's side of the pond for the October session of Connecting the Dots with Dr. Food. So hello from Dublin. As you know, CFI's mission is to help the food system build consumer trust by creating more transparency. And we've accomplished this through a combination of shared values and understanding the trends that are impacting consumers, both in the US and across the globe. So we can encourage you, as always, to visit foodintegrity.org to learn more about our member benefits, our programs, the training, and our upcoming transparency summit. So our network we have a broad network, as you know, of food chain experts, and monthly, we have the opportunity to tap into experts like David Hughes, also known as Dr. Food. So with his 4 decades of food chain experience, he works with many multinational companies, associations, speaks all over the globe. So I was happy to catch him. We are pre-recording since we're both on them today. So we won't have any questions at the end. But as always, please feel free to send questions to us and we'll get back to you. So welcome, David.
Well, as ever, good to be with you, and I'm delighted. Welcome to Europe. I mean, interesting enough, as you arrive in Europe in another couple of days, I'm off to Australia and Thailand, actually. And the Australia end, I'm happy because it's the middle of their springtime, so brilliant for me.
It will be brilliant. It will be. Enjoy. So, interestingly, today's topics all tend to relate to environmental efforts and pressures from across the food chain and how those intersect with trust. I've just arrived from Morocco, and let's talk about stark difference in what environmental means across the globe, especially post-earthquake, where folks in Morocco are just simply talking about survival mode. I plan to spend some time this week at the supermarkets and have more insights on this at the end of the week, but really wanted to start today's topics with consumer trust regarding claims around carbon reduction. So David, tell us the latest from the UK as companies evaluate how they're approaching this complex topic.
Right. Well, what's clear, Mickey, is that we're stumbling on the path to carbon neutrality. It's intriguing. Major food companies in the UK like Nestle, Evian Water, Sodexo, which is the food service company, Morrison's, which is a major retailer for us. They are backing away from making claims about being on the road to carbon neutrality or towards net zero. Why, you might ask? Well, first of all, they've worked out that consumers are skeptical and also baffled. And they just don't trust the claims they hear. For example, it's Aldi, the hard discounter in the UK. It's been claiming carbon neutral on its scope 1 and 2 emissions, and no doubt that is true. But of course, it doesn't talk about scope 3, where most of its carbon impact is all the way down their value chain, supply chain. And people are also realizing that firms making carbon reduction claims actually base this on the purchase of carbon credits. So not actually changing practices. And so this is perceived, and it's seen, probably rightly too, as being like greenwashing. And notably, for my mind, this last month in September, the Carbon Trust, which is a very good global not-for-profit agency and really on the leading edge of driving decarbonization, has dropped its carbon neutral scheme due to this lack of consumer trust. And it's moving towards, whether consumers will get this, it's moving towards new labels that specify, for example, the % reduction of carbon for a certain year compared to a previous year, or comparing the carbon impact of a greener product than the regular product. And the example that comes to mind is like, what's the carbon impact of a vegan Kit Kat versus a regular one? So we'll see how that works out. And actually, worrisomely, recent research shows that a lot of carbon offset purchasing, particularly via the voluntary carbon market, is not what it says it is. And activists from Greenpeace, not least, they're very noisy and provocative that carbon offsetting is just simply greenwashing. And what's more, consumers are starting to believe them. So, I mean, it's worrisome, I think, because the voluntary carbon market seems to be pretty badly damaged. But, let's remember that was set up to protect tropical forests, yet it doesn't seem to be working in practice. And Mickey, in last week, the EU announced that it's becoming, it's banning environmental claims like carbon neutral or we're eco by 2026. So, I mean, there's a real move in this area.
Yeah. And we found, we called it on a panel I was on a couple of weeks ago, green hushing, right? Everyone came out and said, we're going to do all this, and now let's just not talk about anything. So consumers are absolutely confused. So interesting stance that the EU is taking. So our next topic is about plastic. Unlike in the US, the EU and Europe have strict recycling guidelines, and they make it easier to do so here. I mean, I'm on campus with my daughter here in Dublin, and all the bins are color-coded and marked for ease of recycling. How much does it help? I'm not sure my college student is always following the rules, but at least in the EU, they're trying. So tell us the latest from the UN and what the UK is doing as a world leader on plastic reduction.
Okay, well, let's start with UNEP. If you remember, that's United Nations Environmental Programme. And at the beginning of September, so a month ago, it released its draft of legally binding treaties to tackle plastic waste. And it's focusing on restricting virgin plastic production and using only recycled plastic by 2040. Now, again, let's remember that close to, I was just saw it the other day, close to a trillion, that's trillion plastic bottles are used each year around the world. Like a trillion, that's 1,000 billion, for goodness sake. But only 20% are recycled. So do we have a problem? We sure do. Mind you, UNEP initiatives are never liked by everyone, and not everyone's on board, not least the petroleum companies, who's remember that it's their oil and gas, which are the raw materials, if you would, that are used to make bottles. And also many countries, not least the US, have a preference for wanting their own freedom to develop their own programs and not to be held to what the UN says. Although, we may sign to the treaties, we don't necessarily follow it. Actually, in the UK, we claim this world-leading plastic reduction strategy, and we want to eliminate all plastic waste by 2040 again. And what we do, and it wouldn't go well in the US, we tax. So taxing plastic packaging, anybody producing plastic packaging has to pay a tax of $260 per ton if there's less than 30% recycled plastic in the packaging. And so, as I say, anybody who produces packaging using less than 30% must pay. So we've just had the first 12 months of this tax period. The government's raked in about close to 400 million US in tax, which was rather less than they expected. And why? Why isn't the tax policy placing pressure on plastic users? Well, actually, what it has done is put pressure on the recycled plastic market. So now it just costs you more to buy recycled plastic. And so that's all boo. But what's sort of hurrah is that increasingly users of plastic are saying, well, hang on, why don't we just start off by saying, how can we use less plastic? So we don't have, we don't have to buy the plastic, and we certainly don't have to pay the tax. So I mean, Sainsbury, for example, again, one of our major retailers, has moved from using plastic trays on its, what would you call them, ground meat products, so mince meat, as we would call it, mince. Instead of using plastic trays, they've moved to shrink-wrapped packaging. And that saves a massive 40% in terms of less plastic in shrink wrapping. But, it's always complicated because the hiccup is that consumers don't like the look of meat if it's in shrink wrapped packaging. They preferred it in the old trays. So as consumers, we're going to have to come to terms with this and say, hey, if we want to save plastic, then we've all got to be on board. I might say elsewhere in Europe, there's also tax policies. In Spain, it's close to $500 per ton. Taxation on plastic is coming to Italy next year. France hasn't got a tax, but it's got a legal binding banning use of single-use plastics. And I was actually taken the other day. I'm going on to Australia this week, and I've been following an Australian startup which is called Refilled, and they've introduced a unique vending machine where you bring your own bottle. I mean, it sounds pretty ordinary, that, and you can get it full of Coke or Diet Coke or or Sprite or whatever you want, and you don't require a plastic bottle. What I like about this is you can get 10 times more beverages into that machine than you can bottles. So there seems to be a real positive for moving in that direction. Just breaking news in the UK, there's a ban on some single-use plastic products. It just came into force October 1st, actually, so this month. So food service will no longer be able to supply plastic cutlery, polystyrene cups, plastic plates, bowls and trays. I think that's a sort of good move, but what hasn't been done well is communicate this new requirement to particularly smaller scale guys. And I've done a quick survey around, and there's a whole pile of little companies have no idea that this is now against the law. So we'll have to sort that out.
Yeah, plastics is a big issue, and it's an even bigger issue in those developing markets. Like I said, coming from Africa and seeing the plastic debris it's sad. So our third topic is another frequent environmental topic when it comes to animal production and its impact on carbon, especially cattle. So tell us what the grocers and their work with cattle producers are doing on this hot topic.
Yeah, right. So as ever, when it comes to environmental impact, and you're talking red meat, red meat has got a big target on its back, and those environmental activists particularly have extreme reactions. I mean, their view is we shouldn't cut back on red meat. We should stop eating red meat, but that's by the by. But as you mentioned, in the UK, that Sainsbury's, who are pretty proactive at this, promoting a new beef product range that has 25% lower carbon than the industry standard. And what they're doing with this groups of beef products is that they work within their beef supply chain. They've got about 80 farmers who are part of the Sainsbury's Beef Production Club. And these farmers are producing beef. They're raised with no chemicals. They use superior cattle breeding and management technologies. The cattle are raised on grass and forage only, so no grains. And the net effect of this is that you can reduce the carbon impact. Sainsbury's farmers love it. Why? They like being green. They like to be perceived as green. And their pricing for their beef via Sainsbury's is linked to cost of production, meaning that the retailer is monitoring production costs and then adds a farmer margin, which gives them profitability in the longer term, which farmers really, really like. It'll be interesting to see how consumers respond in this way. Mind you, this isn't unique. Of course, in the US, I think you've got a USDA carbon reduction authentication programs already in place. In Sweden, there is a beef product called Lome, which is low methane. As I mentioned, going to Australia, Coles, the big retailer there, has a carbon neutral product. But I'm encouraged to see that there's a lot of activity in this area.
Yeah, I'm excited to go do some supermarket visits over the next few weeks here in Ireland and Scotland. So see what claims are being made. So with so many serious topics, we'd like to end on something different and unique. And we spoke about this topic before I got on the plane to come over here, and I've seen the commercials. So tell us a little bit about what Lidl is doing and who their key spokesperson is.
Right. So remember, Lidl, which you do have in the US, but it's like Aldi is a hard discounter from Germany, actually. But in the UK and other European countries, the Lidl grocery stores has enlisted who? The Terminator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger, as what as? Well, as the face of its DIY, do-it-yourself tool range in an advertising campaign. So here we've got the former governor of California, that Terminator. And what's he doing? He's shown with power tools and encouraging the DIY dream. And he's even there with small kids on the playgrounds, actually mimicking some of his great scenes. If you remember, if you watched it, don't feel embarrassed if you watched Kindergarten Cop, for example. He's muscle bound and he's 76, God love him. And clearly he's still not averse to topping up his bank account, and good on him. I would say it's good fun to see him out there.
It's good fun. It was good fun to see it after we discussed it as well. So that's all the time we have for today. It goes quickly when we chat and have fun. So thank you to all of our viewers for joining us today. We hope to see you on November 5th for our next session of Connecting the Dots in the Food Chain with Dr. Food. We have our Transparency Summit coming up November 14th and 15th in Chicago. So if you have not yet learned about it or signed up to join us, please go to foodintegrity.org and follow the signs for the Transparency Summit, or follow some of our announcements on LinkedIn. So thank you, David. Safe travels to you. We're so close yet so far. Once again,
exactly.
Our paths will cross one day somewhere, I'm sure, in person, but always lovely to speak to you.
And for me too, and enjoy your stay in Europe.
I sure will.
Talk to you November 5th, which is a special day actually in the UK. It's our bonfire night, and
oh, right.
So it's Guy Fawkes night. I'll tell you more in November.
Great. Well, we'll learn more about that next month. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Cheerio.
Bye.